Hello, and welcome to the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and for the next half hour, we'll be speaking with several very talented authors about their newly released books, what their inspiration was for creating their unique stories, and why it would be a great book for you to read and share with your friends and family. And of course, everybody strives for the American dream, but up next is a book about a man who has really kind of realized the American dream. It's called Jim Kirsting, An American Dream by author David Johnson. David, thanks for being on the show with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book.
Well, Jim is an acquaintance of mine through marriage. He is married to my wife's mom. And Jim asked me, after I had written my novel, which is also a Christian faith publication, if I would write his story. Jim is from northern Indiana. His dad had a farm that Jim and his two sisters worked hard on through their youth. What made this an interesting story was that Jim is now one of the best-known Harley-Davidson and other motorcycle dealers in the country, and how he went from his meager upbringing in the cornfields of northwest Indiana to being highly reputed and respected man is the making of a very good story and is a true example of an American dream, and that's why I jumped on the opportunity when he asked me if I would write his story for him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was looking at some of the list of accomplishments. Of course, his Harley-Davidson dealership, a founder of the World of Motorcycles Museum, just accolade after accolade. What do you think it was about Jim that made him so successful?
Well, Jim and I share a couple of beliefs about life. We're both very devout Christians. We believe that God has a plan for everyone, and Jim's faith carried him through a lot of hardships and a lot of setbacks. Jim became the person that he was because of the character that he built as a child. He was originally in the Catholic Church, and then he converted to the Lutheran Church. Jim's philosophy of being a decent and honest and a good friend to people served him well as he built his business.
Now, when somebody reads this book, what do you hope is the greatest benefit they get from reading it?
Well, in planning the book, I set a couple of goals, Chris, and the first goal is that people who believe that they're capable of good things and great things will achieve those things. And the fundamental parts of Jim's character that helped him achieve his success were his faith, his honesty. He told me several times over many interviews that his dad taught him, son, always tell the truth. That way you never have to remember what you told somebody. And so that carried him through life, and I found him to be a wonderful man. But what I wanted the reader to take from the book is that really all of us, meaning all Americans, have the ability and the freedom to pursue our aspirations and to achieve things that seem like a dream at the beginning and turn out to be a dream come true.
Jim seems like an amazing man, and anybody who picks up this book is going to be blessed and inspired in their pursuit of the American dream. The book is called Jim Kirsting, An American Dream by author David Johnson. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, just to name a few of the locations. And David, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity, Chris.
And now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, we have a very interesting story that I think is going to grip many readers. It's called A Light in the Darkness by author Kasey Pallutto. Kasey, thanks for being on the show today.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Now, give everybody a sense of what this book is about.
Well, this book is a story that I wrote about my life. I was unfortunately sexually abused by my father as a child and into my teenage years. And it's also a story of, the abandonment that I felt by my mother. And I would warn readers just to know that there is some graphic content in the book. It's a very detailed description. But otherwise, it's also a book that's full of forgiveness and love and healing. And that's really kind of the goal that I had in mind when I wrote the book.
Now, when you decided that you wanted to tell your story, what was one of the driving forces behind that?
It's kind of a long story. I'll try to make it as short as I can. A couple of years back, it was decided that my mother needed to have a kidney transplant, and it really forced me to take a look back at my life because I had intended to be her donor. And when I did that, I really looked back and saw, that I really still had some feelings of anger towards my mother and some feelings of guilt and shame from my past, and it was a real eye-opening experience. And when I started to share that with some people, I was encouraged to write the book. Once enough people told me I should write it, I decided that maybe the hand of God was working and trying to tell me something.
Now, how was it for you to go back and recount all these stories of the things you had been through?
Well, it was a very difficult process. But the thing is that I had actually, the surprising part is that I had actually had a fairly good relationship with my parents, even into my adult years. So it was always right in the forefront of my mind, because I have a little girl, and the first and foremost thing was always safety for her. So, it was always very present and in front of me. So it was very easy for me to recall all the details. It did bring up a lot of emotional responses, and I'm sure that if someone who reads this has had some abuse in their past, it could possibly do the same, but it's also a very healing process.
And I got to imagine that's probably one of the things that you hope the reader gets most from it is the ability to be able to not get past, but really be able to cope better with things they've been through, maybe?
Yeah, and I think that's really what's most fascinating about my particular story is that throughout my life, I really have come out of all of this, what seems to be unscathed. And through my book, I kind of relate that to eventually realizing that was the hand of God in my life from way far back before I could even remember. But I've really been someone who's been free from any kind of, nightmares and a lot of the things that you hear that would normally happen to a person who's been sexually abused. So I'm very grateful for that.
Now, when somebody picks up this book, what's the one message you really hope your story drives home with them?
I think the one main thing that I want people to understand is that there's no reason ever to live their life alone and ashamed and suffering with this information. I would say the biggest piece that I want people to know is that it's okay to tell someone. It's okay to share their story. It's okay to, release those feelings and face some of those fears. And, it's very healing to do that. And it really kind of opens your eyes as to why you are the way you are when you're able to really release some of that and just be free from it. So my words are definitely share your story with someone.
Well, I think this is going to be a story that people are blessed to read, whether they've been through a similar situation or just to hear your testimony of how you went through this tragic situation to a place of forgiveness. The book is called A Light in the Darkness by author Kasey Pallutto. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo. Kasey, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks, Chris.
And up next on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, we have a very interesting book. I like the premise of this. It's called Some Infallible Characteristics of Christ by author Reverend Dr. Robert W. Thomas. Robert, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
Tell everybody what this book is about. What can they expect when they read this?
Well, when they read this book, it can be inform them about basically Jesus Christ, who I love talking about. Talking about his humanity, his blood, what it's all about, his mercy, his anger, and all this. Give people understanding what the book is really all about, who Jesus is and what he's all about. Because, in today's society, I think that's being overlooked. If you know Jesus, but does you know what he's all about? That's the main thing. Be the truth what he's all about.
Yeah, I think you watch the news or you watch any sort of interview, celebrities, television stations. They're all trying to tell us who Jesus is, but a lot of them have no background with Jesus, and I think there's a lot of misinformation about who Jesus really was.
One thing to believe Jesus, that's the main word that's being left out. Some people don't understand the word believe. And a lot of people say they believe, but they don't live the way that Jesus lived or the way that he is living according to the scriptures. And I try to, indulge in that, even though the title might not reach out to a lot of people, but until you start reading the book, then you find out it's a difference. So we try to get the people the truth about Jesus Christ. And when I started reading the book or writing the book, found out there are so many characteristics of Jesus Christ, and I couldn't put it all down at one time. That's what it's about.
Now, what inspired you to write this?
Well, first of all, the Holy Spirit, even other than the Holy Spirit, when I was going to school, I had to write anyway, and so that's what really inspired me. I said, if I have to write anyway, maybe I'll write, in a book form so that I can inform the people what it's all about. And other than that, my mother, she only had a 4th grade education. That's why I love talking about her. She passed away about a month ago. She loved, she inspired me because she only had 4th grade education, but she wrote a book. Just thinking about those things inspired me. You've
written about the various characteristics of Christ. What do you find? Which characteristic about Christ did you find most intriguing in your studies?
In the book, most about his humanity. thing that Jesus did as a human being. And he came to, I believe that he came to show us how to live, how to love one another, how to associate with other people, and whether they were healthy or whether they were sick. And just thinking about and reading about and learning about his humanity influenced me to love other people more. I thought I was doing okay until I started learning about Jesus Christ more. And now I know how to love people more. And that's what I love about his humanity. And thinking about his humanity, thinking about Jesus being a sociologist, because he socialized with everybody. That's what I like about it.
Who do you think is going to most benefit from reading your book?
Hopefully leaders, because they lead. How can they lead people to Christ if they don't know who Christ really is, or they don't believe that Jesus is Lord? That's the problem. They don't believe that Jesus is Lord. They talk about it, but do they really believe it? So hopefully this book would influence leaders more than anyone else, and unbelievers, as well, but mostly leaders.
Now, is this something you'd like to write more about? I mean, I'm sure there's probably more you could write about the characteristics of Christ.
I'm just thinking about this since I'm talking to you in the last few days. I said, what other characteristics of Christ that, and I got many others to write about. I couldn't put it all in one book, so, and speaking of that, of course, my second book would hopefully be out next year. My third book will be about the sequel to this book, and talking about other characteristics of Christ, which is going to inform or educate people to who Jesus really is and get them to do godly things.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is an interesting book, and I love reading anything about Christ the person. I think everyone's going to be blessed and learn a lot from reading this book. It's called Some Infallible Characteristics of Christ by author Reverend Dr. Robert W. Thomas. You can pick this book up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, just to name a few. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Okay, I appreciate it.
And up now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, we have a very interesting devotional. I like the premise behind this. It's called Intentional Christian 31-Day Devotional for God Seekers by author Jennifer Miller. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, give everybody an idea of what this devotional is about.
This devotional is about Christians and God seekers developing a personal devotional life after the pattern of Jesus. When he said that he made a practice of withdrawing to remote places to pray, that we as Christians have to develop this kind of life, and that it has to be done intentionally.
Now, what do you think is one of the biggest hindrances to people taking the time to dedicate time to devotion and a study of the Word?
For me, I believe that it's time. Time in the business of life, situations, circumstances, hardships. And so therefore, I believe that they get so busy that they find it difficult, not intentionally, to not spend that time that is critical to their Christian development.
Yeah, I think in today's society, with all the distractions, people really need to make a concerted effort to study.
Absolutely. And in my book, Intentional Christian, 31-Day Devotional, I invite my readers to walk with me through the seasons in my life of relationships, family difficulty, job loss, personal and mental challenges. And through all of this, how God kept reminding me that I have to be intentional as he was. If he had to make the practice of withdrawing to get away and spend time with his Father, so must we.
How was it reflecting on your past to write this devotional? I imagine it had to have been a very interesting journey for you.
It was not my intent to write this devotional. And my personal journey and testimony is about a year and a half ago. I finished my devotional time with God, and I was on my way off to work, and he dropped this in my heart. And from that time to now, he caused me to go back and look at my devotional times with him and begin to write this devotional to inspire others that he caused me to be intentional through all these things. And I'm allowing my readers into my personal life, things that they could relate with, dealing with suicide, financial difficulties. And yet he caused me to look back on the things that I wrote that was just between me and him in our personal time and begin to write this devotional.
So what is one of the key components for somebody to be more intentional in their Christianity?
You know what? It might sound redundant, but the key is to ask. Ask God to make you intentional. One thing that I've learned and I found out is that it's not just going to happen. And so as readers read my devotional, they will realize, wow, she went through all that. So do I. But I pressed in and I asked God, make me intentional. Show me how to be intentional when I'm going through all these things that I didn't expect, things that are out of my control. So we have to first ask God, show me how to be intentional in the midst of all the things that I go through in life.
So for the person looking for a devotional or just a book in general, they're at their favorite bookstore, or they're at their favorite online platform for purchasing books. Now, there are a lot of good devotionals out there, but what is the one thing that the reader is going to benefit from most by reading your devotional?
They can benefit because I'm coming to some degree right where they're at. Financial difficulties, relationship, job loss, dealing with just the hardships of life, and to know that I'm opening up myself to them and saying, hey, I might be vulnerable in this area, but you can benefit from knowing no matter where you're at, that we can connect and that we can understand that you're not the only one going through this. I'm just allowing God to use me to let you know and be encouraged that if I made it through it, you can make it through anything that you're going through.
Well, I think this is going to be a great devotional for people to pick up, to draw inspiration from and growth from. It's called Intentional Christian, 31-Day Devotional for God Seekers by author Jennifer Miller. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, just to name a few of the online locations as well as their brick-and-mortar stores. Jennifer, thank you for taking the time to be on the show today.
Thank you very much.
And with body image and body shaming being so prevalent in today's society, I think this next book is really going to touch home with a lot of people and a lot of families. The book is called Saving Michael, a Bulimia Story by author John Hunter with Sherry Hunter. And we have John with us today. John, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to, Chris.
Now, give everybody an idea what this book is about.
Basically, the book covers the last 15 years of our youngest son's life. It began when he was 15 years old, and he's 31 now, and his life is still progressing. He began as a bulimic when he was 15, and over a 3-year period became so thin that he almost died. And by God's grace, God did a mighty miracle in a hard way to save his life.
Now, what made you decide to tell his story?
We had so many people say, well, you ought to write a book when we tell them about Michael's life. And I think some of the events that did occur should have killed Michael. Michael is a walking miracle. He shouldn't be alive, humanly speaking, today. And Michael has had 2 different traumatic brain injuries, one from a motorcycle accident, one from an anoxia accident from grand mal seizures caused by the bulimia.
Oh, wow.
That did permanent damage. And he's gone from being totally paralyzed 5 years ago, unable to speak, and now he can walk, he can talk with limited vocabulary, and he's amazing. He is a life joy for Sherry and I.
Now, give everybody a sense for those who don't know anybody that's had an eating disorder. Kind of how did it start for Michael?
Well, Michael had been stocky when he was 15 years old. He wasn't fat. He weighed about 185 pounds, and he was 5'6" tall. But he had some ribbing in school. One boy insinuated that Michael had girly breasts, and that one particular comment affected him so severely that he decided to diet. And he started dieting, and after a few weeks, it became an obsession. He cut his calorie intake to just 200 to 400 calories a day, and he was taking ephedrine supplements to help control his appetite and to energize him. And after 6 months, we finally had him hospitalized because his weight had dropped from 185 pounds to just 105 pounds. Michael lost 80 pounds in just 6 months. And we put him in Children's Hospital for 10 days. He showed some improvement, and about 30 days later, when he got out, he started the practice of bulimia. And bulimia is very, very severe and very dangerous, and it's a horrible, horrible disease. And from that point, Michael continued to lose weight, and by the time he was 18 years old and he had a near-fatal motorcycle accident, his weight had dropped to 72 pounds.
And I got to imagine at times it was probably very trying on your faith. What did you do to keep that faith strong and keep positives in the forefront?
Well, God used Michael's bulimia to really bring me to my knees. You know, Paul says that God's strength is perfected in his weakness, and I think God's strength perfected in ours. I learned many things about my relationship with God through those years.
Now, when somebody picks up this book, what do you hope they get most from it?
My 2 goals are, if they are a Christian, that they can see that God is able to meet every need that we have. He may not meet those needs in a way that we expect him to, but he does have the ability and the love to meet our needs. If a person reads the book and is not a born-again believer, I pray that they'll be saved. That's my biggest goal for this book, is to see people reconciled to God and to see people's lives become at peace with God, because God has an answer to every problem we face. way. It's hard to see that sometimes. It's hard to feel that sometimes. Our feelings tend to dominate our life. And it's when we come to that point of helplessness and we have to say, God, I surrender. And Lord Jesus, I give it to you, this problem. Please accomplish your will. I think that's when God starts to react and take action in our needs in a complete manner.
Well, I think it's amazing that you've shared the story of Michael and your family, and I think people who read this book are going to be truly blessed for you sharing it. The book is called Saving Michael, a Bulimia Story by John Hunter with Sherry Hunter. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, just to name a few of the platforms. And John, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Chris, very much.
And of course, anybody who's worked in any sort of setting knows that sometimes there's always a little adverse relationship between management and the leadership and the common working man. And that's what this next book is about. They Are Not the Enemy, Common Sense Leadership by author Florence Young. Florence, thanks for being on the show today.
Welcome.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book.
Well, I wrote it because I moved from the academic world into the corporate world, and I had just finished my doctorate in leadership and was appalled by the way we were treated. And there was the constant feeling in the air that we had better shape up or else. And to delegate, he would come to one of his people and he would say, I want you to do this. She would say, I can't. He says, you like working here, don't you? So then she would dump, not delegate, something that she didn't want to do anymore on one of us. So, from those experiences, I said, if I ever get a chance, I'm going to write a book about this. And so I did.
Now, what do you think it is about the working world that makes such an adversarial relationship between ownership and management and the working people? Why is there such a disconnect there, do you think?
It's basically ethics. A lot of people who are in management and leadership know pretty much how to do what they're doing, but they don't know how to treat people. People are just objects. As I told my boss one day, I said, she asked me to have somebody do something right now. I said, she's not a piece of equipment with buttons to be pushed to make her work faster and to get it done. That was a big chance that I took. I thought I was going to catch it, but I didn't. But basically, leadership just believes that they're the boss, and people need to do what they are supposed to do because that's what they are told to do. And people who work for them are basically thinking people, and they would be happy to do their work better if they were treated better.
Now, what do you think is one key factor? What do you think is one key, maybe attribute is the better word, for leadership that would help make them more effective?
They need to learn the basics of leadership. The four basic functions of leadership are organization, communication, planning, and evaluation. And so few leaders will follow those because you use those four functions to perform all of the tasks of leadership. And when you follow the rules, things are going to work just fine, especially in the manner in which you treat people, that they are individuals with feelings and you don't harp at them and you don't threaten to fire them and you don't treat them as though they are the ones who are keeping the bottom line from increasing.
Now, is this your first publication?
Yes, it is. I wrote it a long time ago and couldn't find an editor, so someone told me about your publishing company, and sure enough, you accepted it, and now it's a published book.
Now, when somebody picks this up, what is the message you hope that the reader gets?
That people will learn how to be leaders, that you're not a boss. You have to let the people know that you know what they're supposed to do and you know how to do it, and you're going to lead them and they will follow. But only if you allow them to follow. If you're going to keep harping at them and fussing at them about what they're not doing, they're not going to follow a leader. A leader has to know where he or she is going, and they have to be able to get people to follow them.
Well, I think there's a great line from the description of this book. Leaders are not born, they're made. And I think this book is going to be go a long way in helping make more respected, more effective leaders. The book is called They Are Not the Enemy, Common Sense Leadership by author Florence Young. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, just to name a few of the online platforms as well as the brick and mortar stores. Florence, thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable. We'll be back next week with another great group of talented authors to discuss their books, their process, and how they were able to get their manuscripts published and out there for the world to enjoy. If you're a writer that is looking for a book publisher, give Christian Faith Publishing a call today at 1-800-955-3794 to receive a free publishing kit, or feel free to visit them on the web at ChristianFaithPublishing.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.